Welcome back to the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Katie Farnan from the Alumni Association, and today I'm joined by John Maurer, who obtained his Master's of Music in Trumpet Performance at Penn State through the School of Music in 2015. He is now a critically acclaimed trumpet and flugelhorn artist and music educator. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So let's start with why you chose Penn State. You came here for your master's. What drew you into Penn State?
Well, I grew up, right outside Philadelphia. Penn State was always, you were a Philadelphia sports fan, and you were also a Penn State fan. And my uncle actually did his undergraduate in marketing at Penn State. So I was always had some, Penn State was always going around in my house and in my family. When I graduated my undergraduate in music education, I was applying to continue my education for a master's degree in trumpet performance. I wanted to kind of focus more on the performance side of things instead of the education side of things. And I auditioned. I applied at Penn State, and I auditioned there. And I was extremely connected with the trumpet professor that was there at the time, who became my trumpet professor, Dr. Langston J. Fitzgerald, and we called him Fitz. His name's Fitz for short. And I was connected with him, just the way he taught and how much time. I think my audition was supposed to be like 30 minutes, and he spent an hour and a half with me, just and that was kind of, I knew I was in the right place. I just felt a connection to the school and to my teacher, Fitz. And I knew that I could do a lot there under his tutelage and his direction and his guidance. And that's, he offered me, he accepted me, and then he also offered me the position as one of his teaching assistants there. And I accepted with no hesitation.
So your experience was a little bit different than the traditional undergrad experience, right? You're kind of more focused on one specific thing. Can you talk a little bit about your experience as a master's student here?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my experience as a master's student, so I was the teaching assistant, or one of the two, myself and another gentleman. We were the trumpet teaching assistants. We would teach and take turns per semester on teaching the methods course. That was part of our assistantship, as well as teaching private lessons to minors, or if they were students who also wanted to say that they played trumpet in high school and they wanted to continue taking lessons for trumpet and continue performing. We would also then, part of our assistantship would be teaching non-majors trumpet lessons. It was different in the regard of I wasn't necessarily in campus life, so to speak, as say an undergraduate. I wasn't staying in the dorms. I wasn't connected to campus. I was staying outside. I actually lived on Pew my first year, and then my second year I lived right next to, I believe it was the Giant, right behind Giant. They have a couple apartments there. So I was traveling kind of off campus, so I wasn't necessarily involved in campus life. And I think that's the difference between, say, a graduate student or an undergraduate student. That being said, being a graduate student, we were required to be involved in all the ensembles. We were required to be involved in everything that had to pretty much do with trumpet or brass, for that matter. And we had I was involved in the graduate brass quintet, so I had connection, and I was getting coached by the tuba professor there, who's still there. Her name is Velvet Brown, as well as the trombone studio. So we were involved pretty much not just with the trumpet studio, but also the whole brass studio and all of the School of Music. And so I'm not sure if the undergraduates were required to do all that, but we were. And I think that's kind of the difference, and then also the similarities in some regard, because we were also in ensembles with undergraduates. We were experiencing and we were playing along, and we were not just teaching them, but they were teaching us, and it was a great experience. I cherish my time.
So after you finished your master's, where did you land? What was the next step?
After I finished my master's, to be frank, I wanted to continue my my education into a doctorate program, and I applied to a number of schools. Also, at this time, I was engaged to my wife, who's now my wife, and we were planning on getting married in July. She was at Ithaca College doing her master's degree in music education. And so we were doing the long distance for those, for a while, for those 2 years. And Ithaca and Penn State, they're not too far apart. They're about maybe 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. So it's not too far. And so we had the end goal in mind on getting married in July and trying to figure out where we would be, if either we would be traveling for my doctorate program, or if she could find a job teaching, being either a band director or music teacher someplace. And at the time, I was accepted at University of Iowa to be their trumpet teaching assistant. And we were so close to moving to Iowa. And then my wife got a job teaching elementary band, 4th and 5th grade in the Delaware Valley School District, which is in Pike County, which is in the Poconos, pretty much. It's right on the border, the tri-state area of Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey. And it was kind of, a difficult decision for both of us because, I wanted to continue my education, but I was also getting married. And I remember this one mentor of mine saying to me, John, it always should be personal before professional. And, there will always be opportunities down the road, but you should always follow your heart. And it's always personal before professional, and I was like, you're absolutely right, and I told that to my wife. And so we both decided to move to Milford, Pennsylvania, which was the Delaware Valley School District. And she took that job, and I started freelancing because ultimately what I really wanted to do was be a soloist. I always had the attraction of being a soloist and performing, not necessarily in an orchestra or a band or in a group for that matter, but as soloist, either with an accompanist, some sort of accompanist, most of the time piano, and doing that, being a freelance. And so that's where I ended up after Penn State. We both moved. We got married in July. We moved to Milford, Pennsylvania, and we stayed in that generic location ever since.
So we'll fast forward a little bit. You are now playing in some pretty large venues, right? Big concert halls, symphony halls. Tell us about what that's like to walk in there and be on stage.
Oh, geez. Well, I never take it for granted. It's quite. I have to pinch myself sometimes. Some of the stadiums and the arenas that I've played so far, I've been quite blessed in that regard to be able to do that. Yeah, it's been surreal. It really has been. I grew up right outside Philadelphia in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, and it's the suburbs of the city, and you never really think that you'll meet your heroes or play in these big arenas, like for instance, like the Philadelphia Phillies. I grew up right outside Philly, and being able to now say that I've played for 10 years, pretty much. At least every year they've asked me back to perform either the national anthem or God Bless America in Citizens Bank Park is just surreal for me to this day, even still doing it, 10 years now. I never take it for granted, and I'm always honored to kind of give back to my city, but any city now, to be able to play the anthem or God Bless America, or to play as a soloist with a big band. Like last year I did some solos with the university that I'm with now, Marywood University in Scranton. And it's just surreal, and I love it. And I it's a service. I always remember what one of my mentors, who I mentioned earlier, Velvet Brown from Penn State. She was the coach for our graduate brass quintet when I was at Penn State. And she mentioned a few times as, it's a service to those around you. And yes, it is a communication between the performer and the audience, but you're doing yourself, you're doing a service to those, you're connecting those emotions. Say like someone had a bad day and they go to your concert, you're able to convey it and have a way of them to express and feel certain emotions that maybe elsewhere they wouldn't been able to do, or connect to the past of a certain experience that they had, not just for yourself, but them as well. And so I always think of that whenever I'm playing in these large arenas, or it could be, 5 to 10 people. I've done that as well. I played concerts for 5 people in the audience. And, I always view it as, you're going to get John, no matter if it's for 5 people or 50,000 people, you're going to get the same person. You're going to get the same work ethic. You're going to get the same emotion and drive and purpose behind what I'm trying to convey through my trumpet or through the music. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. You also have played for some public figures as well. What is that like to, be up there and see these people who, you read about online or you read books about, and you're now performing for them?
Yeah. So I played when I was an undergraduate. It was with Reverend Jesse L. Jackson. It was a jazz combo. And I remember him coming up and he's just being like so larger than life, because, you read about, different individuals that have marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so you feel like these, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the people that I have performed for, but just the individuals that I have met during performances. And you start to realize over time, the more you meet them, these heroes and these people that you read about, these heroes or role models, these icons, that they're just people. They're just like you. And they found a way to connect to their either art form or their platform, and that's what I started realizing over time. That was one of the first big icons that I played for. Was the Jesse L. Jackson. It was for Black History Month, Black American History Month, and it was surreal. Most recently, with when it comes to playing for professional sports teams, I was playing for the Baltimore Orioles, and it was the first time they invited me there to perform the national anthem. This was last year, and I'm warming up in the green room. I'm just warming up, and I had a couple friends there who are really, diehard Baltimore Orioles fans, and they're, I like to bring people with me that have a connection to that sports team, a surreal connection to that sports team. And I'm warming up, and the representative that I was with, he was like, Cal Ripken Jr. is in the hallway, and Cal Ripken Jr., as we all know now, is called the Iron Man. He's one of the greatest baseball players who ever lived. He's up there with Derek Jeter and Babe Ruth, and he's Barry Bonds. He's up there with the greats, and we're like, no, you're joking around, And so we go in the hallway, and he's there, and he's taking a picture with the family, and so he comes into the entranceway to the green room where I am at, and I introduce myself and I shake my hand, and I'm a little bit starstruck because I'm not only playing these anthems for professional sports teams, but I am also a huge baseball fan. And so I shake his hand and I introduce myself and say that I'm playing the national anthem, and I'm honored to meet him and play the anthem. And so he's like, actually, I have to use the bathroom in the green room. That's why I'm here. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, I'd love to take a picture with you when you get a chance. And so he's staring at me, and maybe like 20 seconds goes by, 10, 15 seconds. And I'm like, oh, no, not, go use the bathroom and then, come back and then we'll take the picture. And so he was like, okay. So it's just like that. It's like, he's like, it kind of broke the barrier, so to speak, to this, he's like an everyday guy, he just had to use the bathroom. And then he came back, he was super nice, took a picture with me, and he was like, okay, so now you have to warm up. And I was like, oh yeah, just like baseball players, just like how you have to warm up, I have to warm up. And so, it's, I haven't had too many starstruck moments. That was definitely one of them. The Reverend Jesse L. Jackson was one of them. and being able to meet them and then also see like they're human beings too, is pretty cool.
So you get invited back to some of these baseball stadiums pretty frequently, and you just did a NASCAR event too this year, right? So what is it like, being there and being back there to play the national anthem or the Star-Spangled Banner, and it being this nationally recognized performance?
I think to answer your question, I want to go back just a little bit. It all started in 2015. I was invited by the Philadelphia Phillies, who's my home city, to perform "God Bless America." Like I mentioned earlier, ever since then, they've invited me back year after year. And I always loved representing my city of brotherly love. And I always really was honored to play the national anthem, or "God Bless America," the Star-Spangled Banner, or "God Bless America," and pay my respects to the country, and then also to those in uniform, and also just the culture. There's one thing that I realized after doing it is just, everybody has a connection to their national anthem. And for us in the United States, it's the Star-Spangled Banner. We all have a connection. We all kind of view it a certain way. And a lot of that has to do with the culture that we are now in, And I always think back of when, I also am a teaching artist at Bethel Woods Center for the Arts, which is the site of the 1969 Woodstock Festival. And during that festival, Jimi Hendrix played the Star-Spangled Banner, and he played it in a certain way. It wasn't straight, and it also wasn't very swung or jazz-like. He played it in his own way, but he also represented what was taking place in the culture and in the country at the time. At the time it was Vietnam War, and there was a lot of turmoil and peace and love and say no to war and that sort of thing. And so he represented that, what was taking place and what he felt was taking place through the anthem. And so I thought of that, and I'd like to also try and do that through my rendition of the anthem as well, to the Star-Spangled Banner. So 2 years ago, I was invited to perform the national anthem for the Philadelphia Phillies. And then the Phillies were invited to be in the postseason, which was a huge deal because we weren't invited for a couple of years. We weren't in the postseason, in the playoffs. And I was a little hurt that I wasn't asked to perform, to be honest. They asked a few other trumpet players, and I was a little hurt because, like I said, I grew up right outside Philly, and I thought, I did a good job and so forth. So I was like, you know what? I really, like I said, I really enjoy performing the Star-Spangled Banner, and I really love performing in these huge arenas and stadiums, and performing for all those reasons that I just said. I only live once, and I'm not getting younger. And like I said, I love baseball, and I love, professional sports and so forth. And I was like, there's not too many trumpet players. Actually, there's none that I can think of that perform the national anthem or "God Bless America" and for different sports teams. And maybe that's a niche that I can try and do myself and try and find my own way into what I love to do. And so I started reaching out to other sports teams, organizations, and arenas. And I was extremely surprised to get responses back. And one of the very first big ones that responded were the New York Yankees, which I actually have the pictures in the back of me, actually, of me when I played there, when I performed there. And so I was blown away that they asked me, because when you think baseball, you think the New York Yankees. No matter where you're from or what, you might hate the New York Yankees. But if for someone that doesn't understand professional baseball, when you say baseball, you think New York Yankees, Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, you think Lou Gehrig, you think, Yogi Berra, you think these iconic, like we were just talking about, players. And so I went to perform the national anthem for the New York Yankees in Yankee Stadium. And then after Yankee Stadium, I was invited back for the Phillies again. And then after the Phillies, it was the Baltimore Orioles that reached out, that they were interested. And then this past year, it was the Phillies, Baltimore Orioles. And then I was also started to get reached out to not just baseball, but then also the Philadelphia Wings, which is a professional lacrosse team for Philadelphia. I was getting contacted by the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, which is affiliate for the Philadelphia Flyers. And then most recently was NASCAR. And I was, I was completely blown away that they wanted somebody, especially someone local like me, because I'm right in the area with the Pocono Raceway. But they've responded. The president of the Pocono Raceway responded, and with my material that I sent to him, he was extremely interested in having me perform for the Xfinity Series, which would have Pocono Raceway has 3 days in a row. They call it their Pocono weekend or their NASCAR weekend. I'm sorry. And it starts with, I believe it's the Craft Truck Series, if I'm not mistaken. I think that takes place Friday. I could be saying the different name. Saturday is the Xfinity Series, and then it's the Cup Series, which took place on Sunday. So I'm smack dab right in the middle of NASCAR weekend, in the Pocono Raceway, 55,000 people. And it was just surreal. It was the most epic anthem that I have done yet to date. It was just incredible. The hospitality and just the, I like to call it organized chaos, because there's just so many people, so many things taking place, but it's very well organized. They know exactly where you need to be and on time. And like I said, the hospitality is just tremendous. And having everyone there while I'm performing in the stands, then also having it nationally televised on the CW. Like I said, I'm so honored and grateful, and I can't believe it happened. I have to pinch myself. It's like almost like a fever dream, so to speak. And afterwards, we were invited to the owner's suite and chatting, and I met a veteran that was 101 years old, which was incredible. Talking to him and chatting with him and hearing his stories. And yeah, it was just, like I said, I'm truly blessed and I'm honored to do so. It was definitely a highlight for me, for sure. Playing the national anthem was quite epic.
It's one of the performances that we want to highlight, not to be biased, but are when you return to Happy Valley. What's it like to be able to come back here and perform at the Bryce Jordan Center, at Pagula, venues like that?
Well, I'm happy that you asked that, because I didn't mention when I first started getting these attractions from professional sports teams. I was also reached out. I was in connection with Gregory Drain, who's the Blue Band director. He's the director of all athletic bands. And I chatted with him about coming back as an alum and performing for one of the teams for Happy Valley for Penn State. I was in communication with one of the managers for the ice hockey team, for the men's ice hockey team. They invited me to perform the national anthem for the men's ice hockey team versus Notre Dame, which was, I came up and I wasn't there. I believe it was the last time I was at Happy Valley. This was in 2003. Yes, 2003. And I wasn't there since, I believe, 2019. So it was quite a few years since I was there at Penn State. And being back, and I met up with my old trumpet professor Fitz, and he invited me to his house to chat over some coffee, and we talked for a long time. And then I came to the ice arena and performed, and that was quite touching to be back as an alum to perform for the men's ice hockey team, especially for a big game against Notre Dame. It was quite intense, even playing for the, NASCAR, playing for the men's ice hockey team versus Notre Dame. And during, especially the ending of the Star-Spangled Banner, just hearing all the the student section, bang against the glass, and that was quite intense. And luckily I kept my composure, and it was just epic. It was great. They won that game, I believe, too, which was awesome, and it was just great. And then coming back the following year to perform at the Bryce Jordan Center was also a kind of surreal experience, because when I was a graduate student, I would park, down in the parking right next to the Bryce Jordan Center and Beaver Stadium, and so and I would walk. I would always like to walk to kind of get my steps in and so forth. I was always kind of active, and so I would walk from the music building all the way across campus, and I would always view the Bryce Jordan Center, as this like mecca, and seeing all the touring, artists that would come in to it. I was just always kind of like, wow, that's awesome. Maybe one day I'll play there. So being able to perform the Star-Spangled Banner in the stadium, and actually this past year, the Blue Band, they were in Florida, I believe, for one of the games for the playoffs, and then so the Nittany Lion was not in his dressing room, so they put me in his dressing room, which was kind of also kind of cool, to be in his room, and his dressing room, his green room, and change. And so that was a pretty surreal experience, to say the least. And I love it. I love giving back and being of service, and like I said, all those things before, found my niche, and to give back to the country and give back to those in uniform, but also then my alma mater, having, the trifecta, so to speak.
So you are now a lecturer. You kind of mentioned that before. You're at Marywood, and you also are at the Bethel Woods Center for the Arts. So tell us a little bit about that, and then any of the lessons that you've taken from your time at Penn State, and you're kind of on the other side of the lesson now. So what you use to teach your students.
I think it has to do with really art in general, and being a musician, it's an art form. And what art is we kind of take from the past, we take what we learn and then mold it into our own, and I constantly, whenever I'm teaching my students, either at Marywood University now as the lecturer of trumpet, or at Bethel Woods Center for the Arts as one of the teaching artists, I always reflect, and I find myself doing things that either Fitz or Velvet Brown or Mark Lusk or Dennis Glocke, all these instructors and teachers and professors that I had at Penn State, I always find myself doing, or asking myself, what would they do in this situation? I remember one, and to this day too, I should mention that I'm still in contact with those professors and those teachers. My teacher Fitz he always used to say this when I was at Penn State, and he still says it to this day: the teaching process never ends, and I believe that too. I believe it never ends, even though I have all these titles and I've played in all these places. One of my favorite things to kind of take into consideration is always maintaining the attitude of a student. Always. There's always things for me to learn. I'm not perfect. And I think that's why we are so attracted to different musicians and different artists, because they aren't perfect, and they're not just showing their perfections, but they're showing their imperfections. And that's what we're attracted to, especially as a musician. I usually like to use the example as like Kurt Cobain, in Nirvana. When we listen to him sing, it's not like this, classically trained singer, operatic singer. He's not necessarily singing in tune. He's actually like hurting his voice, he's screaming. But why are we so attracted to the way he sings and the way he presents his music? It's because of that emotion side, that imperfect side that we're attracted to him, to this vocalist and his emotions and his pain and so forth. And so I like to take that and also what I learned from those professors and kind of reflect, and then also try and give back to them. It's like my teachers to me, and then me to them, to my students. One story I would like to mention, actually, that I remember from my teacher Fitz, is actually wasn't to me at the time. It was to another student. It was during one of our master classes. We always used to have a master class on Wednesday evenings. And the student, I think the student just came back from blue band. So he was playing a lot, blue band. They constantly are beating up their faces, so to speak, especially for trumpet players, because they're playing nonstop for however long the rehearsal is beforehand. And then he came to our trumpet studio master class, and he had to perform a solo. And he mentioned to Fitz, he was like, oh, my chops hurt. And I remember Fitz turning to him and saying, hey, everybody's chops hurt. Don't worry about your chops, worry about the music. And it just kind of spoke to me, it's like, it's like, no matter what's taking place in the day or how you feel, you're in service and you're conveying something bigger than yourself, and like I said, nobody's perfect. And when you convey that through music, you want to trust your training and trust your practice and embrace that, and that's why I try and think of when I'm teaching my students to always put the music first, not yourself, but the music and what you're trying to convey and connect.
And in 2018, you had a debut album come out, Songs for My Son. Can you tell us a little bit about the process from having this idea to actually then having a physical album created?
Yeah, so in 2017, my firstborn, Patrick Declan, was born. And I kind of wanted to give him kind of a stamp on who his dad was. And I always had this idea of a concept album. I always enjoyed concept albums. And, it's funny because there's this one concept album I really enjoy, and it's actually like a metal band, Dream Theater. They have this album. It's a concept album called Metropolis Part 2. And I always used to love listening to it growing up. And it was every song had a story that was connecting to the next. And I always kind of liked that idea. And I wanted to give so going back to my album, I wanted to give my son something as like a stamp for him to look back on when I'm gone, and listen to and see what it's like for his dad and so forth. And so I thought about maybe the idea of a child going through life and what they go through, with schooling and the relationships with their parents, falling in love, maybe owning a pet even, different things that you go through in life. And so I picked certain pieces that not necessarily meant that certain ideologically, but like, for instance, like there's one piece I do called The Chartist that for me, it kind of had a toss and turn in the piece, like kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It's a very kind of warm, open, lyrical introduction, and then it goes into this high-paced, double-tonguing section. And so I kind of viewed that as a relationship or a connection that you have with your sibling. You love them one moment and then you can't stand them the next. But you still have this underlying love for them because they're your sibling, they're your blood. And so, even though that piece doesn't mean that, that piece has another meaning that the composer written it for. So I found pieces though that meant that to me, and used it throughout the album to demonstrate that and be the concept of what a child goes through in life. And I named it Songs for My Son. It was dedicated to my firstborn. I had a lot of actually Penn State grads that I worked with when I was at Penn State perform on the album. I had a majority of the graduate brass quintet that I played with. They performed on the album, as well as a childhood friend, and then also a percussionist that was the percussion TA at Penn State when I was a graduate student as well, along with him at Penn State, play on the album. So it was very special to me to kind of bring in all these people that I cherish and hold to high regard, as musicians, to be a part of the album and collaborate with me. And then I released it in 2018. It took a whole year to kind of get the production done, the recording done. It was a lot longer and a lot more tedious and a lot more work than you think. It was, but it was well worth it, and it was received by the community with open arms. There was a lot of high praise for it, especially from different review organizations like Texture, which is an online review source. And then the big one that I received was from the International Trumpet Guild, which is kind of like this a guild of all trumpet players that reviewed the album. There was all positive reviews, which was, I was honored to receive it. Really, it was humbling, and it was incredible to get that review for the album, because the way I performed it really was kind of avant-garde, so to speak. The way I played it, it was more as a soloistic expression instead of classical jazz. This is the way it should be. This is the way it should be. It was more just like, this is how I would perform, and this is who I am throughout it. And so, it was quite incredible.
And super special to have that now recorded forever. So
it's always
worth it. Yeah,
and it still holds up to this day, which I always go back and listen to it, and I always think to myself, I could do this differently. I wish I would have done that differently. But it's like I said, it's a stamp in time, and it still holds up, and it's who I was at that time too. As an early father, so it was great.
So we've talked about a lot of experiences that you've had here, and I don't know if you're going to be able to pick just one, but what was the coolest out of all of them that you have experienced in your career?
It's very difficult to pick just one, because each of them has a different story behind it. That's why I think I love doing what I do now. Each performance of the Star-Spangled Banner, each performance of God Bless America, each performance as a soloist, either for a concert series or as a soloist for a big band, each is very different. Now, I will say, being a father, my oldest son is autistic. He was diagnosed about 3 years ago now. He's 8 years old, and last year, I think this might be the first time I'm speaking about it. Last year, I volunteered to perform for one of the, it was a softball tournament that they had for the Pennsylvania Special Olympics. And this was right after I played for Yankee Stadium. And I actually kind of regret speaking about it now, because I kind of like that memory just for myself, but now it's all in the open. But I think that was probably the most touching for me, because having that diagnosis and then being able to give back to the community and play the anthem for their softball league, for the Pennsylvania Special Olympics, was super cool. It was awesome. There was no microphone or anything, it was just me going there and playing. But I felt super close to that because of my connection with my oldest son. And not just my oldest son, but also my youngest son and my family in general, now being a special needs family, because we're all experiencing it together. So I think that was the most special for me, being able to do that. That was pretty amazing. But other than that, though, each one is different, and I cherish each one differently. Either if it's like a Star Wars night game, or if it's meeting Cal Ripken Jr. for the Orioles, or Yankee Stadium, or NASCAR. Being on national television. Each one has a different core memory, so to speak, and a highlight for me. So it's hard to just pick one, but I think the most special is that the Pennsylvania Special Olympics.
I had a feeling when I asked it after talking to you today that it would be tough to nail one down, because they all sound like they've been so special to you to be able to be a part of each of those things. We like to wrap things up with a quick little lightning round of some Penn State related questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
So your favorite Penn State sport, which one are you grabbing tickets to first?
Well, I have to pick one of the ones. I know everybody probably comes on here and says football, right? But I think I have to go with one of the ones that I performed the anthem for. Each one was different, like I said. the ice hockey, men's ice hockey, was pretty intense. Like, with them beating on the glass, that was pretty awesome. On a personal level, I would love to perform the anthem for the football team. So maybe in the future that would be pretty surreal. But I'll have to say men's ice hockey or men's basketball. Probably
All right.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about your professors throughout the podcast. So this one might be tough as well, but your favorite class or professor or both while you were a student?
Well, I talked a lot about my trumpet professor, Fitz. So I'll pick someone else since I already mentioned I hold him in such high regard. I will mention, so there was one professor. He was my wind ensemble director. He retired since I've been there, and his name is Dennis Clockey. And the way he carried himself as a professor, as an educator, as a music educator, the way he instructed the ensemble, I don't think I ever saw him get upset. Like visually, like I know, like he was, frustrated,
Right.
But he'd always go like this.
That was your signal.
And then we were like, oh man, like, yeah, we got to get our crap together, And but he would never like raise his voice, or he would never yell at us. He would either do that or he would just leave. Then we would know, oh, we need to practice. We need to get our stuff together. But the way he carried himself and the way he approached it, he was always interested. He wasn't my primary professor. He was just my wind ensemble director. But he was always interested in what I was doing. Like I was lucky enough my first year at Penn State to be invited as a graduate teaching assistant to represent Penn State as a guest artist at Weber State University, which is in Utah. And I performed Peter Meachan's piece, Orpheus. Peter Meachan is a composer from Canada. And I went there and I came back, and Dennis Clockey was so interested in what I did there and who I was performing, because he knew about Meachan. And so I would say Dennis Clockey. And to this day, as not just a trumpet player or a trumpet professor, but as just a music educator, I always think of how he treated and made his students feel. It's kind of like that quote from Maya Angelou. I might butcher it. I might butcher the quote, but it's like, it's not what you do or what you say, but it's how you make people feel that they remember. And I always remember how he made me feel as one of his students in the wind ensemble. And so I think he was probably one of my favorites, and one of my favorite classes too was wind ensemble. So.
Your favorite local restaurant?
Favorite local restaurant, I will have to say Otto's. It was both me and my wife's favorite to go to. Otto's was definitely my favorite. It wasn't the one that we went to the most as like a trumpet studio. We always used to go to Champs a lot as a trumpet studio, but I think Otto's was my favorite. So.
And last question, who would be your dream Penn State dinner guest?
Oh, Penn State dinner guest. Oh, geez. Well, I have to say this because, I'm from right outside Philly. Yeah, Barkley from the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Yeah, I have to say it, right? So, yeah, he would have to be it. I mean, we just won the Super Bowl. So, and the Eagles are another big dream for me, to perform the anthem for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's actually number one for me, I think. So,
well, we're excited to see where you're going next. You'll have to keep us in the loop.
So hopefully, yeah. And then if I perform the anthem for the Eagles, then I'll have Barkley as a dinner guest. So.
Perfect. Full circle moment right here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Both Penn State grads.
All right, John. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a great conversation. And like I said, I'm excited to see where you land next.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you to John for joining us today, and to our listeners, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Special thanks to our guest relations coordinator, Abrielle Clark, and our graphic designer, Gabrielle Harris, for their work on this episode. For more information about the Alumni Association, visit alumni.psu.edu. We are you.